about copyright part 3. So if you guys are writing songs and releasing them and you are concerned with your rights and protecting your rights and making sure that you're going to get paid fairly, then this video is absolutely for you. Today what we're going to talk about is 3 and very, very important issues. Number 1, we're going to talk about copyright infringement. Number 2, we're going to talk about masters or copyrights too. And then we're also going to talk about the amendments or recent amendments to the copyright law since the 1976 Copyright Act, effective January 1st, 1978. Okay, you guys? So pull up a chair and let's get going for office hours with Professor Bobby Borg, music business education. Let's do this. Number 1, infringement. So let's first talk about what is copyright infringement. Well, if you recall from the very, very first video, we talked about when you take an original idea from your head and you put it into a tangible form, you get what's called an exclusive bundle of rights under the United States Copyright Act, Section 106. And those rights, real quick, are what we define as CDPDs. That means you have the first right or the right to authorize others to copy or reproduce your song. You have the rights to authorize others to distribute your song. You have the rights to publicly perform your song or authorize somebody else to publicly perform it. And you also have the rights to what's called a derivative work, meaning nobody can make a work derived from your work unless you get their permission. Well, infringement is when somebody does one of those things or all of those things or a combination of those things without getting a license from you, without getting permission, and without paying you a fee. Okay, you guys, so that is what is infringement, bottom line. Now, a very, very important thing to understand about infringement is that you have to always interpret what's called the damages. That basically means that if, let's just say, you're in a movie theater and like the credits start to roll and like you hear your song and you're like, what? You know, I know one of the musicians in the group that recorded that, or I know the producer, I worked with the producer at one point, you know, then you know you have a problem and you should speak with an attorney about this, you know, what you can do about it. However, let's just say you were in a band and the band broke up and you all had co-wrote a song and the band members, let's just say, for example, pressed some vinyl and ended up selling the vinyl in a club. And now like you're freaking out because you found out that they sold 10 records or something, you know. What's the damage? Like, does anyone really care? I mean, certainly you are more than welcome to go get an attorney, and that attorney can write a cease and desist letter to the band asking them to actually take off or take down the song. I mean, could you do that? Yes, but the bottom line is, you know, fight the battles that are really worth fighting. Okay? All right, you guys? So by the way, I see some of you guys that jumped on Drake and Tommy, what's happening? If you guys have any questions, be sure to actually leave them in the comments and I promise I'll get to them. But for now, I just want to pump out this outline, okay? So let's talk about now what you have to prove in an infringement situation. So if you find out that someone actually infringes you, what are some of the things that you have to prove? So the first thing that you obviously have to prove, number 1, is that you know, you registered the composition with the Copyright Office in Washington, D.C., because you cannot file a lawsuit unless you actually are registered with the Copyright Office in Washington, D.C. So that's number 1. Number 2, does your work predate the person's work? So in other words, if I come out with a song today and I publish it, and then maybe half a year later I hear a song that was maybe published, you know, a couple months after me, then my song obviously predates the one that I'm saying has ripped me off. So you have to predate the work, okay? Number 3, you have to prove something called access. That means that the people that stole from you had access to stealing from you. So access could be as simple as your song is a hit and it's all over the internet. Or it could be more specific. For example, it could be, I worked with that producer in the studio 2 months ago. It could even be that, all right? But you have to prove access. Another thing you have to was substantially similar to the work that was ripped off, okay? Or the other way around, I beg your pardon, that the people that are ripping you off or have ripped you off substantially similar to your work, okay? So it can't just be like, did you hear that little part? Did you hear that little part? It's gotta be obviously a substantial amount, okay? Sorry about that, everybody. All right, so let's get back to this. Another thing you have to prove that the person that's ripping you off as a part that's unique in character. In other words, your part is so unique that the fact that it's now in this other song is a willful infringement. It can't be by accident, okay? Another thing that you have to prove is maybe you might have a witness, somebody that was in the studio with you that worked with that particular producer. You have to have proof of publication, so you have to say, hey, it's been on Spotify since this day, or hey, I released it on vinyl since this day, and you have proof of that. And then, of course, you have to talk about the damage. So you might say, look, you know, my song came out a year ago, and now this guy is blowing up with streams, and he's making all this money, and that's BS. You know, I'm not getting any share of that money, and that person ripped me off. All right, so these are the things that you have to prove in an infringement case. And for everybody just jumping on, welcome to Office Hours, Music Business Education. We're talking about copyright right now. Right, and if you guys have any questions, be sure to leave them. I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. All right, so let's get back to our outline real quick. Now, what else are we going to talk about? One of the areas where there are a lot of cases of infringement is what's called interpolation and sampling. So interpolation is when somebody takes a melody or a riff and replays it and re-records it and puts it on their record. Okay. Now, who the person that's being infringed in this case is the actual songwriter. Then there's what's called sampling, and that is when somebody actually lifts it directly from your sound recording. And now the person that's actually being ripped off is not only the sound writer, but the person that actually created the master, which could be the same people, by the way, of course, right? So those are two areas where infringement is very, very common. And, you know, we hear things that happen all the time in this particular case. So what is the best course of prevention against being sued? And of course, against infringing others. So against being sued, make sure to just write with good people. You know what I mean? Like, just try to avoid writing with strangers online and stuff that are like, yo, see what you could do with my beat. You know, stuff like that is probably going to end up getting you in trouble, maybe. I mean, listen, I know it's cool creatively, but just watch who you write with. Also, make sure to register anything you write with. And if you do co-write something, make sure that you have a solid split sheet. Okay? And a split sheet is just basically when two people contractually agree about what the splits are, and then they just sign it and put that away in a file. So that's what you can do. That's what you can do against, to prevent maybe people that are trying to rip you off. Now, what can you do about sort of infringing others? Make sure, number one, to write your own music, okay? You don't need to rip people off. You don't need to sample. You don't need to interpolate, okay? So that's number one. Number two, if you do have to sample and interpolate, clear your rights. You know, I mean, come on, you guys, what are you thinking, right? If you want to blow up, then clear your rights, because as soon as you blow up, someone's coming after you. Okay, now this could be a big argument, because some people will say, look, I had to do whatever I had to do to blow up, and, and I'll handle any lawsuits that come my way. But lawsuits aren't fun, right? So, and you probably don't have the money to fight it, right? So you have to be careful about this. It could also be embarrassing too, as well. So make sure to clear those rights, both in the master and in the song, all right? And also, when you buy beats, be careful of buying beats. What's happening, Paul? Paul just jumped on. Be careful of buying beats, okay? Because a lot of times you could buy a beat from somebody, or you can license a beat from someone that used samples, and they didn't tell you they used samples, and they didn't clear them. So you want to make sure that you buy beats from credible people. And this happened, the famous example is Lil Nas X. He bought a beat that he thought was cleared, but it contained a piece by Trent Reznor. And when the song blew up, right, what happened? He got sued, and now Trent Reznor owns part of that song, right? So you have to be super careful. All right, let's move on real quick. Let's talk about masters. Masters are copyrights too, and this is an area that a lot of people don't understand. So everything I've been talking about primarily has been about the song, but now let's talk about masters as copyrights, okay? Now, masters are a relatively new copyright. They weren't recognized federally until 1972, so there's a lot of misunderstanding about them. But generally speaking, when you write and record a song, you own two copyrights. You own the actual song, and then you own the master recording of the song. Two separate things, you guys. Okay? So if you have a recorded song, you probably own two copyrights. The copyrights in the song and the copyrights in the master recording of that song, right? So a lot of people don't understand that. So just make sure to be very, very clear of that. Now, how are they formed? Well, master sound recordings are formed typically when you capture sound on record, essentially. And anybody that's involved in capturing the sound on record is entitled to that copyright. So listen up. If you have musicians come in and play on the record, they own their performances. If you have a producer that's helping you produce the track, they own a share of that master recording. So if you don't want that to happen, and you're in the studio, make sure to do it under a work made for hire agreement where you're paying the producer under a written agreement that specifically says that they do not own a piece of the master. And you have to do that for the actual musicians, the drummer that comes in, the harmonica player. You have to say this is a work made for hire condition. You are getting paid and you relinquish all rights to the master recording. Okay, so you have to be very, very careful about that, if that's what you want to do, or you might want to share in it equally, but you have to be aware of this. Okay. All right. Some things that we should talk about is what are the differences between song copyrights and master copyrights. Where there's a couple, I'm not going to go into them here in detail, but we'll talk about a couple of the most important ones. First of all, when you register a master recording, it could be done on one form, an SR form with the Copyright Office, but just be clear that when you're registering your song and your master, if you own both those rights, you could do it on an SR form. But otherwise, you'd register your song on Form PA with the Copyright Office, and you'd register the master on Form SR. Okay, those are two separate registrations. Also, the copyright notice is different. For a song, it's Circle C, and for a sound recording, it's Circle P. Okay? All right, what else? Couple other differences. When you create a song, you get an exclusive bundle of rights under the United States Copyright Act, Section 106. You get the rights to actually reproduce, you get the rights to distribute, you get the rights to perform, and you also get the rights to a derivative work, right? But with sound recordings, strangely enough, when your sound recording is played on terrestrial radio stations, you do not get paid. You do not get paid for the song, for the master part. You get paid for the song part, but not the master part, right? So, but thankfully, due to a copyright amendment in 1995, they did amend that. So now you do get a sound recording royalty when your songs stream on non-interactive radio stations like Sirius XM and iHeartRadio and those types of things. And it is collected by an organization called Sound Exchange. So you need to make sure that your sound recordings are registered with Sound Exchange if you're the owners, because otherwise you're losing money. Okay, what else? There's other amendments as well, but it's kind of detailed, so we'll just keep things simple for now, okay? So now let's move on and talk about some of those copyright amendments that are really, really important. Remember, the most major amendment in copyright law happened in 1976, effective January 1st, 1978. There were massive changes, and it took 2 years to sort of make the transition. But since then, there's been other very, very important transitions as well. And let me just go over, or amendments real quick. The first one was the Berne Implementation Act in 1989. And basically what that said is that you no longer have to put copyright, 2025 on your works anymore, on visually perceptive works, simply because as part of that sort of treaty that we joined, you no longer have to do that. But I still recommend doing that because it shows people you're serious about protecting your works, okay? Another thing is it made your copyrights valid in other countries. So in other words, people that are part of the Berne Convention have to recognize our rights, or your rights in the US as a copyright owner, in other countries. So if someone rips you off in Germany, they have to acknowledge that you own a copyright in the US, And of course, the trial will be fought under German law, but they will recognize that you are a copyright owner, okay? So there's no such thing as international copyright law, but there is something called the Berne Convention Implementation Act that recognizes your copyrights worldwide, except for certain countries. And one of those is Korea, okay? And a couple other ones, Iraq and a couple of other places. Okay, so what other amendments are important to talk about? Let's talk about really what's called the Digital Performance Right and Sound Recording Act of 1995. I already mentioned this. In this act, they said two different things. Number one, non-interactive digital performances are covered. So when your music plays on iHeartRadio, there is a royalty that you earn, a performance royalty you earn. And then number two, for digital downloads, it probably doesn't matter to you guys because you don't do this anymore, but they made a statutory rate for digital downloads, and it's the full statutory rate. In other words, nobody can cut or lower that rate. In 1998, there was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Very, very important, because this is why you guys see a lot of infringed material on YouTube. Because in the DMCA, they have what's called the safe harbor law. That basically means that big tech companies can't get in trouble if there's illegal stuff on their platforms. However, they have the rights, or they have the obligation, to take it down. So when something is illegal on YouTube, the publisher can contact YouTube and say, take it down. And that's why sometimes you see strikes and takedown notices, right? But a lot of times, because people are just gonna put it back up again, right? Sometimes the publisher just says, screw it, just put ads on top of it and pay me a percentage of the money. So when you guys see covers on YouTube, most of them are illegal, but it's just the publisher going, screw it, just pay me advertising, is pretty much what's happening, okay? All right, what other things? You guys remember Sonny Bono of Sonny and Cher fame? If you guys don't, Google it. But basically, that was another amendment that happened in copyright law. He got 20 years added to the duration of copyright. Okay, so it used to be your life plus 50 years. Now it's your life plus 70 years, thanks to Sonny Bono. Then, of course, there's the MMA called the Music Modernization Act. That just happened in 2018, and it started, so the real effects of it started happening in 2021. The most significant change was the Mechanical Licensing Collective. And if you guys don't know about this, you listen up, because you're losing money. There's now one central database that all of the digital service providers have to report to. So Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, they take all the royalties that they're supposed to be paying and they pay it to the MLC that oversees it, and then the MLC pays the artist. So if you're not registered with the MLC, you're losing money, okay? Now, a couple other things to talk about really, really quickly. Before this, there was like 3 different agencies. So it was very complicated because all the digital service providers were paying out to all of these different agencies, and then as publishers you'd have to chase all these different agencies, and it was absolutely insane. So that's why the MMA came in. So now there's one central database. All right, you guys, so listen, I am doing these live sessions. I call them office hours. As you can see, I'm on campus and I'm just getting ready to go do my lecture. So hopefully to my students, this serves as a good overview, and to all of you, let's see who we got. We got Franco, we got KJ, we've got Squiggly, I think it is, Squiggly Miggly. We got a bunch of people on here, Paul, Jordan, we got Drake, we got Tommy. What's up, everybody? And just go ahead and leave your questions, because I really can't answer questions right now. But once this publishes, or go ahead and leave some questions for me, and I swear I'll get back to you. I'm at youtube.com/Bobby Borg, where I have tons and tons of videos. And I do these, I pretty much like 3 or 4 times a week. Okay, you guys? So peace, love, and class has started. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.